and controversial. There are now more than 6,000 across the country, double the number from just a decade ago. They're publicly funded but privately run. And whatever you think about the merit of charter schools versus public schools, merit is no longer driving the debate. What's driving the debate is money. The charter movement is now part of the growing privatization of public education, and Wall Street sees an emerging market. Take a look at this piece published last fall on Forbes.com. Quote, dozens of bankers, hedge fund types, and private equity investors gathered to discuss investing in for-profit education companies. There's a potential gold rush here. Public education from kindergarten through high school pulls in more than $500 billion in taxpayer revenues every year. And crony capitalists and politicians alike are cashing in. Example, in Ohio, two firms, both contributors to Republicans, operate 9% of the state's charter schools and are collecting 38% of the state's charter school funding increase. In Philadelphia, a Democratic stronghold, 23 public schools closed for good last summer to be replaced by charters. Here in New York City, progressive Mayor Bill de Blasio set out to curb the charter school poaching of public education. But in recent weeks, the charter movement, bankrolled by wealthy financiers, struck back hard with the media campaign costing more than $3.5 million.
These are the 194 faces of Success Academies.
My daughter would have a better opportunity at a charter school.
Mayor de Blasio wants to stop them from opening and expanding.
I voted for de Blasio, but I didn't vote for you to take my child's future.
Under this withering assault, Mayor de Blasio has turned conciliatory, determined, according to the New York Times, to avoid the wrath of a well-financed charter school movement, even dialing up billionaires personally asking for a truce. The private buying of public education has brought a piercing cry of alarm from my guest. Once a champion of charter schools, she's changed her mind, and that was a reversal that struck home with a seismic wallop. Diane Ravitch is our preeminent historian of education. She's worked for presidents from both parties and served as an assistant secretary of education. She's a scholar with a popular following. In the last year alone, her website has received more than 8 million visits. Her teaching, writing, and advocacy have long influenced our debate about schools and the public policies that affect them. And her latest book is a bestseller, Reign of Error, The Hoax of the Privatization Movement and the Danger to America's Public Schools. Diane Ravitch, welcome.
It's wonderful to be with you, Bill.
We're talking about big money, aren't we?
Absolutely. At minimum, at least from the estimates I've seen, it's a market of $500 billion. Now,
A year?
Yes, an annual market of $500 billion. So the entrepreneurs do see it as huge opportunities to make money. There are now frequently conferences, at least annually conferences, on how to profit from the public education industry. Now, I never thought of public education as an industry, but the entrepreneurs do see it as an industry. They see it as a national marketplace for hardware, for software, for textbook publishing, for selling whatever it is they're selling, and for actually taking over all of the roles of running a school. This is what the charter movement is. It's an effort to privatize public education because there's so much money there that enough of it can be extracted to pay off the investors. But I think what's at stake is the future of American public education. I'm a graduate of public schools in Houston, Texas, and I don't want to see us lose public education. I believe it is the foundation stone, one of the foundation stones of our democracy. So an attack on public education is an attack on democracy.
The people behind privatization, you say they're flush with cash. Where is it coming from? Where does this money trail start?
You have to understand that, firstly, we do have a significant number of for-profit charter schools. They're not the majority by any means, but they're driving a lot of the legislative changes. There's also the power of the federal government. Our Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, put out $4.3 billion for Race to the Top. And he said to the states, you can't be eligible for any part of this money unless you lift your cap on charter schools. So suddenly, the lure of getting that federal money made many states change their laws to open the door to many, many more charter schools. So that's really what's driven the increase in charters. But what the other thing that's driven them is that there's a tremendous political force of very wealthy hedge fund managers who are investing in the charter school industry and seeing it grow. And so they have fought for these laws. There's also a lot of charter school money going as political contributions to legislators in many of the states where the charters are booming.
There's a move right now to change Dallas into a chartered district, and it's promoted by the billionaire John Arnold, who's been in the news recently for his views on pension plans. Do you take that sort of thing seriously?
I think it has to be taken seriously because John Arnold, of course, wants to change public sector pensions. And I have a kind of a visceral negative reaction to the idea that someone who's a billionaire doesn't want to see a public employee retire with a decent living pension that they've put into all their life. So I don't like the idea that billionaires who have no appreciation of the importance of public education want to change it to their liking. No one elected John Arnold to do this. But I think that Dallas is at risk, and the people of Dallas don't want this. And I think if democracy works in Dallas, they will reject this idea of somehow taking Dallas and turning the whole city into a charter district.
You have said that within 10 years there'll be cities in this country without public education.
I think at the rate we're moving now, we will see places like Detroit, New Orleans, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Kansas City, Indianapolis, and many, many other cities where public schools become, if they still exist, they will be a dumping ground for the kids that the charter schools don't want. We will see the privatization of public education run rampant.
But not everyone will agree with you over the loss of public education. There are parents across the country who feel that public schools have let them and their children down, and they're looking for alternatives. They're not going to agree with you.
One of the points that I wanted to make strongly in this book is that American public education is not failing, it's not declining. It's
contrary to the prevailing public mythology.
Absolutely. American public schools deal with immense problems. So the biggest problem in our society today is that nearly 25% of our children live in poverty. And most of those kids will go to public schools and will bring all their problems through the door. And teachers will tell you they had kids in their classroom where a parent was murdered, where the children didn't get anything to eat yesterday, where the children are homeless. These are the problems our public schools are dealing with, and they're, in most cases, doing an absolutely heroic job. But where public schools are in trouble, it's because the community's in trouble. And instead of breaking up public schools and sending the kids off into the hands of some entrepreneurs, we should be addressing the needs and problems of the children.
If the for-profit motive were taken out of charter schools, do you think they have potential?
No, because I think that what charter schools should be is what they were originally supposed to be. They were originally supposed to be collaborative, cooperating with public schools, trying to solve problems that public schools couldn't solve. The original idea was that they would go out and find their dropouts and bring them back. They would help the kids who lacked all motivation and bring these lessons back to public schools to help them. What they have become is competitors, and they're cutthroat competitors. And in fact, because of No Child Left Behind and because of Race to the Top, there is so much emphasis on test scores that the charters are incentivized to try to get the highest possible scores. And now that there are so many hedge fund people involved, they want to win. They want to say to the guys who are on another school board, my charter got higher scores than yours. So if you're going to make scores the be-all and the end-all of education, you don't want the kids with disabilities. You don't want the kids who don't speak English. You don't want the troublemakers. You don't want the kids with low scores. You want to keep those kids out. And the charters have gotten very good at finding out how to do that.
Charter schools are not all bad, are they?
They're not all bad. The worst thing about the charters is the profit motive. And I want to reiterate that most charters are not for-profit, although many of the nonprofits are run by for-profit organizations. For instance, in Ohio, where they're overrun with for-profit operations, they're actually not for-profit charters. It's just they're run by a company, in one case called the White Hat Company, which has extracted about $1 billion in taxpayer funds since 1999. In Florida, where there are some nearly 600 charter schools, they're overrun with for-profit schools. There's a charter empire in southern Florida where the The brother-in-law, the guy who runs the Charter Empire, which is worth more than $100 million, is in the state legislature and is in charge of education appropriations, and he never recuses himself. And the charter industry has basically taken over the legislature of Florida. In Michigan, more than 80% of the charter schools operate for profit. They don't get good academic results, by the way, but they make a lot of money. And the worst of the charters, frankly, are the virtual charters. This is a money-making machine.
Virtual charters?
Yes, these are charter schools that have no physical school, and they advertise very heavily. And they're in many states. The biggest of the companies is called K-12. It was funded by Michael Milken and his brother.
Michael Milken of Junk Bond fame.
Right, and they're very profitable because they get full state tuition, signing up kids to learn online.
Online learning for K-12.
K-12's program is customized.
K-12 is a fully accredited program.
Call or visit k12.com today.
So the kids are basically homeschooled. They get a computer and textbooks, and then they learn online.
So they make their money from the state funding.
Right, so they get full tuition money, and all they give out is a computer, and they may have one teacher monitoring 50 or 100 screens, in some cases more than 100 screens. The teachers are low paid. They don't have any physical building to take care of, no custodians, no social workers, none of the regular expenses of the school. They're very profitable. K-12, by the way, is listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
On your blog, there's a speech by the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings. He seems to be saying that 20 years from now, 90% of our school children will be in charter schools, and that we have to get rid of school boards because all this democracy is very messy, and everything should be managed by charter-like boards. Is that the end game? Is the charterization of American public education?
I think for many people in the charter movement, that is the end game. They want to see an end to public education. They continue to say that charter schools are public schools. They are not public schools because they say in court, whenever asked, we're private corporations with a contract with the government. In fact, just recently, there was a decision in New York that charter schools can't be audited by the state controller because they are not a unit of the government. In California, there was a decision in the federal court saying charter schools are not public schools, they're private corporations.
So this puts their accountability off limits, right?
Right. And in fact, in many states, the charter schools don't have to hire certified teachers. So we're moving in a direction that is harmful to democracy, that is not good for kids, and that will not improve education. And so when you say how I feel about the charter movement, I'd say that it should return to its original purposes, which is to help the neediest kids, to seek out the kids with the lowest test scores, not the highest ones, and to collaborate with public education to make it better. But what it has turned into, and I think that Reed Hastings' speech puts that very well, is an attack on democracy and an effort to replace public education. That if 90% of all the kids are in charters, the other 10% that's left, that's called public schools, will be the dumping grounds for the kids that the charters don't want. That's a direct attack on our democracy.
Would you concede, though, and that it's possible, Reed Hastings and others, believe that democracy can't solve these problems, that you need private entrepreneurs who know how to get things done to run these schools?
Well, the problem with letting the entrepreneurs do it is they know nothing about education. I think what Reed Hastings doesn't understand is that the highest performing nations in the world don't have charter schools and do not have voucher schools. The highest performing nations in the world have a very fine, very equitable public school system. I was in Finland not long ago. They aim to have an equitable school system, and it doesn't matter where you go to school in that country, you will find a good school. That's what we should be aiming for. You aim for equity, and you will get excellence.
When you were on the money trail, looking at how this money influences the movement, you ran into the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. What did you learn about ALEC?
ALEC is an organization, as I discovered, that's been around since 1973. It has something like 2,000 or more state legislators who belong to it. And ALEC is very, very interested in eliminating public education. it has model legislation, which is